Call to order. Any guests, any public comment? Approval of the CPC minutes, April 11th, 2019.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of April 11th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Was there a second set of minutes you were
No.
looking for? Because I thought I saw that on my phone. There's only one set.
Only one set.
Okay. All right, new business. Young lady, welcome.
Good evening.
Aye.
Ginny, would you just announce?
Sure, Ginny Hewitt, I'm the director at Brooks Free Library, and I'm here to give a status update on the Rogers Group statues. We were here March 14th, to give an update, and since that time, we have received the completed assessment and conservation treatment plan from the conservator. We have the invoice, and that was signed and forwarded to the Finance Department for payment on March 25th, so should be all set. Do you sign that too, Dave, or do you? I don't know how
yes.
that works. Okay. So, I mean, I'm sure it's been paid by now. So, at the end of March, I met with the Historic District Historic Commission representative on the CPC, Mr. Doan, gave him a copy of the assessment report and treatment plan, and we went around and had a tour of the building and looked at the statues. And I don't know if all of you know this, but Mr. Doan's mother was Virginia Doan, who was the head librarian for 42 years. So not only is this the town's heritage, he grew up, you know, appreciating and treasuring these statues, and they've been part of the town's history since the library opened in 1880. So I wanted to make sure that he was satisfied. You know, I valued his opinion, and I wanted to make sure he was satisfied with the quality of the assessment and the treatment plan. And I have a copy of this for each of you. It's a little hard to, I couldn't just really send it electronically. It's separate parts, and some are legal size. I thought you'd have
Thank
trouble
you.
printing it. Some pages are legal size, and some are.
Any chance I can have two?
Sure.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so in here, the first part is a narrative, and, wait for the microphone. The first part is a narrative where it talks about the statues and the condition and discusses the details of the recommended treatment. It's got some good information here for staff on how to care for the statues in the future, some dusting techniques and cleaning techniques. And what I also asked him to include, and he did, is disaster response information. One of the biggest risks to any kind of material is water, and you know, with AC leaks or a roof leak, you never know when that's going to happen. So of course, we would want to get experts to come in and do that, but how to stabilize things before that happens. So he includes that on page 4. So that the narrative is the first part. The second section, so I separated the different sections with the orange page. The second section contains a photograph showing the current condition of each statue, and there's 26. So there's, you know, there's a few photographs of each one from different angles and showing any damage. The third section is a spreadsheet that documents the current condition. And the fourth section is listed as the recommended treatment that would be done on each piece. So that is, this assessment and conservation treatment plan is what would form the basis for a request for quotes. It's, you know, what you'd be asking the conservator to do. So Mr. Doan's feedback was positive. So at this point, now I'll contact some qualified, experienced conservators that have worked on this type of plaster statuary and get that and get the quotes. We have $19,850 in CPC funds available. If the quotes come back within that amount, the trustees could award the contract at the June 12th or July 10th meeting, and the work can begin. We anticipate the work would be done in stages, 4 or 5 statues at a time, as every conservator that I've talked to is unable to store such a large collection in their studios. So part of the request for quotes includes the transportation and the insurance on it, that they would have to pay that, so it wouldn't be extra. Some of them may be small enough that they may personally do it, but they all would have experience in doing that kind of thing, and the insurance on them. If we don't get the funding, if we don't have enough funds to do the recommended work on all the statues, what we would like to do is do the historically owned statues, the ones that we owned prior to the theft in 1976 first, or the ones that may need repair to prevent further deterioration, such as, there's some that have some structural defects in, like a weak support for an appendage, or missing or damaged plaster on a certain feature. So that would be the plan, and then we could come back to the CPC to request additional funding to complete the work. But what I want to check with you is, do you agree with that approach, or what do you want me to do if we don't have sufficient funding to do all the work? Do we start it, and do we come back later for additional funding to see if you would approve that? I just want to know how we should proceed.
Mr. Doan?
Yeah, I think I had suggested starting with the original ones, because that would be the priority, because they're the ones actually are doing the worst as far as paint flaking and everything. So, and to go to the extreme of actually stripping them and repainting them, which is done in Rogers Groups, and the original company had recommendations for that, would be a lot more expensive. So stem the worst of it at this point, and then concentrate on those. And yeah, I mean, I think that maybe ask for 2 bids, maybe, or 2 parts, one the original group and the couple that you mentioned, and then the second group. And if the first bid fits, if they both fit in, everybody wins. But if the first part, only the first part does, and then you have a solid number for next year to apply for the rest of them.
One quick question from me. In the 76 theft, was there any damage to any of those statues?
Yes.
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 There was. Is it extensive?
Sure, one's missing some arms, and that is,
Yeah, and it's noted in the report, there's a couple of them that are so far gone, it's better to look for replacements than try to repair what you got.
Okay.
So those you wouldn't do. I think those should be eliminated, and maybe duplicates eliminated.
yeah. Agree.
Kath?
Well, I was going to ask to the value of the collection, but perhaps that's not a good thing to talk about publicly.
Did you include that?
It's in the original application, I believe,
Yeah, yeah.
which I have with me. The values, what's hard is, it's
Jen,
art and it tends to fluctuate.
I'm not necessarily comfortable with you adding that information on the air.
Publicly. Okay,
That's why I
Please.
said that, yeah.
okay.
Please.
So, in terms of the repairs, whether they're from the first group or the second group, I would just prioritize the ones that are in the worst condition and move from there, worst to least. Unless there's some that are more valuable than others.
No, I think the idea is, the ones that were historically owned by the library are more our history, our town history, do you know what I mean? And so sometimes those things get prioritized.
Okay.
I think they're all, more of the recent ones, recent in
A recent
decades,
being,
but I think they well, the condition varies.
well, let me just ask you this.
That's
So when, are they labeled differently in the library? Does it say this one came
No, until I
here,
went-
this one came there?
No, until I was actually preparing this project a few years ago and getting a list to see and what was stolen and what we had. There were 12 that we had before the theft, before the theft. And I saw those were repainted by the Women's Club
Right,
in
you said
town.
that
and
last time.
those actually look better than some of the newer ones.
Okay, so, I mean, it really is, obviously it's up to the trustees, but, I would say the worst to the least, and then, I would imagine that the value lies in the fact that it's a collection versus just individual.
No, I don't know about that.
Chris?
short-term memory seems to be fading more and more.
Especially this week.
Going back to our last conversation with you last year, the original grant intended to cover the restoration of all of the sets.
And we may get that.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the studios that had given me an estimate to put in for this project, is one that I'll be asking. Yeah. So it's possible.
Yeah,
we
okay.
could.
All right, that's what I thought.
John,
Although, Bob, did you want to say?
No.
No, okay.
But that,
good.
So I want to know, I hope this isn't too off topic, but is the John Rogers who did the original sculptures, he related to the John Rogers that was one of the early presidents of Harvard University and was among the first
I've not
settlers?
heard that, though. Don't
No
you think you would have
idea.
heard that?
I
I mean,
don't
I've
think-
seen different
I mean, it was-
biographies. I've
John
read stuff
Rogers
over
was
the years.
based in
and
New York City, the statue maker.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
His-
do the molds still exist?
I,
When you talk about replacing some
oh,
that
no,
are
no, they were all
beyond,
manufactured in the, from the time of the Civil War to the late 1800s.
Yeah.
So I would guess no, or somebody would be doing it. So they weren't mass-produced, like factory-based, but there were molds, and, I mean, so each piece isn't unique, so there are some still around.
I see.
Different condition you'll see quite a variety when you look at pricing, because some things might look fine, to you and me, but they were repainted by people without the right skill, so you see quite a difference in quality and what's out there. But at this point too, I don't know that we're really looking to grow the collection anyway, because we're not a museum and display space is difficult, and finding a place where they're, not gonna be damaged because.
Secure.
Yeah, I mean, they're secure with a security alarm system, and we've got good HVAC for the last 20 years, so they're low relative humidity, and they're protected that way, but.
And that was the cause of probably the damage of the original ones, was the library didn't have any HVAC for years.
Yeah.
John, you all set?
Yeah, I'm all set, thank you.
Mary?
I'm just wondering, is it a situation where when you go out for your RFP, is it something they'd give you on a statue by statue basis? Or would you do two groupings and say, like, the older and then,
Well, my
like an
first preference, I
alternate
think,
one, alternate two?
It's not that much work on our part when we have it. I would rather go out first and see if we can get the whole collection done for what we have. And then if we have to, we ask them individually, because that takes more time, and so they might be less likely to want to give us a quote or want us to pay for a site visit to come down and look at them. And that's when I was trying to get estimates before, they really wanted to come with site visits. And, I sent a lot of photos, but anyway.
And why do you think it's harder for them to estimate each statue? Because they effectively have to do that for their own
We can
bidding
ask that, sure.
processing. Because that does give you the most flexibility.
Sure.
Then
You know
you
what?
can,
Yeah.
then you can spend what you have or make
Right.
your priority decisions based on, kind of a pick and choose method was my only thought on that.
Sure.
Versus if you go out for the RFP in specific groups or all together, if you don't have the money, then you've got to go through the whole bidding process all over again. You can't just,
Although it's not, is under 25,000, it doesn't have to go through the formal RFP process, so, and we don't expect it to be, but.
Kathy, follow up?
Are they, are these individual statues, and I'm sorry, I've seen them in there, but I haven't looked at them that closely. Are they numbered, signed, like this is 20 of 200, or I mean,
No, but there are books that, a lot that detail how many were in a certain piece were ever produced.
so are there any identifying marks on them? There must be some kind of,
I'm trying to think now if they actually have a thing. I don't know, some may,
I didn't see any reference to that.
yeah, I don't remember
It
whether I
just
had.
labeled what they are.
Are they handmade?
Well,
No, they're made
no,
of
they're-
Oh, if they're
molds.
going back to the early 1800s.
yeah, but,
Well, they have to make a structure, it's explained in here, wood structure and wire structure inside.
Okay.
And then they must put the plaster and then do a
Around.
cast around it or something.
there's one last question.
Go ahead.
Is the, was the theft in 1976,
Yeah.
is that like a cold case? I mean, aside from,
They say no, and we had that one recovered statue that was left at the treasure chest a few years ago.
but 56
nothing
were
came out.
stolen,
Yeah.
and they've never surfaced?
I know. Speculation is they went into a private collection.
Okay,
It's like the Isabella Stewart Museum.
yeah, on the same level.
Maybe
Our
someday,
little library.
someday the whole
Well, it was-
thing will come out.
It was the
Be all
second
connected.
largest collection in the country
Was it
at
really?
the time,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
After New York Library.
People
Wow.
still come to see them.
Oh, yeah.
No,
No, they're definitely.
that they're visiting the area, yeah,
Absolutely.
specifically.
Mary?
Just one question. Did, I seem to recall there being a discussion about you hadn't received a bill. Have you,
Yep,
had you
we
gotten
did. It
that
was-
bill? You
yep,
were- Okay,
3,150, just what we contracted for, yeah.
marvelous.
Yeah.
That was, my brain's a little fuzzy today.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Ginny asked a question. We all asked our questions. Any recommendations from the board to her? Chris?
I mean, my recommendation, I think, is a practical one, to assume for the moment that the funding that was granted will cover the complete restoration. And if it doesn't, then I suppose there's always an opportunity to apply for more funding, and it can either be approved or not. But, certainly, given the history here, we would probably be biased toward approving it, but
Sure.
can't guarantee that, obviously.
Anybody else from the board?
I just would like to say that if we find that the cost is triple or quadruple what, originally thought, then we might want to put a hold on it and really reassess whether we want to move forward versus just getting a couple of things done.
So,
I mean, if you thought for $18,000 that you could get 27 statues restored, and that's what we sort of
yes, yeah.
thought as a group,
Right.
and then it turns out we can only get 4 statues restored, then I would feel more comfortable if you came back to us
Okay,
with a recommendation from your
sure,
trustees, and then we could talk about it. That's personally, that's all how I feel.
okay.
No, that's not unreasonable. Chris?
But just to clarify, the RFP describes a project that is a complete restoration, right? That's what.
It describes that they're going to do this work.
Right.
Right, that's
Yeah,
what I mean.
sure.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yep.
So I don't think we don't need a motion for that. You pretty much got the guys of what we're asking. what the
Okay,
board's
so
asking.
I'll, unless we have the money to do all of them, I should just plan on coming back, or?
No,
No?
I mean,
To me, the thought is if it's exorbitantly more.
Okay.
If you
That's
thought you were
if
gonna
it
get,
goes above and beyond
if you're talking,
what's,
you need 100,000 instead of the 20, then,
Sure,
then
and
that's
maybe a
another.
matter of, if, with quotes, it's much different. I mean, you solicit the quotes, they may or may not respond, but if we get them and they're all exorbitantly high, then maybe we can, these studios can give us suggestions of their competition that's not quite as specialized as they are. There might be a little less cost. Because we want to ensure that they'll be there in the future, but that it's not museum quality. So we could still go out and try to get others.
Kathy?
Or maybe there's a grant we could pursue for the restoration of these, if they're that important to the historical significance of the town. I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
we gotta, we gotta put a cap on
Sure.
something. If you listen to the voters on Monday and Tuesday night,
Yeah, it was
do we
pretty-
need it or do we want it?
Yeah, I know. I know. Okay. Sounds good.
All right,
Yep.
all right.
Can I say one other thing?
Sure.
We, at town meeting, well, before town meeting, we were asked to provide information. They wanted to have that slideshow that they had on the different projects, you know, what the debt has all gone for. And I was asked to provide on the exterior preservation project, and so I did. And, but at first I said, well, this is not debt, this is CPC. And that's okay, it's gonna be, you know, your tax dollars at work. So I don't think the presentation was misleading, but I've read in the Cape Cod Times and in the Chronicle that both say, you know, major debt projects like the Brooks Free Library and blah, blah. And so it's not there. So I am going to try to write a letter to the editor and explain. But I don't know if you saw the slideshow. It was very hard to see
Yeah.
what was up there. So this is the actual photograph. When I sent you the photographs, I hadn't found this one. Well, actually, what was very interesting to see was that when I was looking, you know, on my computer for old files from when we first started applying, and these are the photos of how bad the library looked, to when, right before it actually got done, it deteriorated so much in those like 6 years. So this is the first photograph. Look at how bad that is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I really wish it would have shown better on the screen, but, of course, that was the worst looking one I could find, which I
Right.
wanted to show, right? But
You have to
still,
show me I was up front and close.
you
in
could
person,
see,
yeah.
I just think on that big block wall it was, I mean, even with the screen.
Oh,
But
rough.
look at the redness or that here. I don't even remember that. I didn't touch the
I
photograph.
don't either.
I do.
Do you?
Yeah, no, I do, because that red is the original color
Right.
of the library.
Oh, wow. So it was, it just looked so bad.
Well,
So
I don't
anyway, I wish
think-
it would have shown better.
I don't think you had to look very closely, because I wasn't tuned in to the project several years ago, but I remember very clearly that the exterior of the building did not look great at all. Looked like it was desperately in need.
I think, you know, you just get used to it, and so then when I was looking for photos, now that it's been done, I was like, oh my God.
So how did, I didn't read the paper, so, you know, my
It
bad.
just
but-
said, it had a quote from Julie's presentation, you know, about major capital projects, but then it said, the next paragraph said, you know, there's been a lot of projects in it, like the Brooks Free Library and Saquatucket Harbor and, you know, the fire station, things like that, that actually debt was incurred for. And,
So
so I
that
don't
needs
think
to
the
be corrected.
That needs to
presentation
be
was
corrected, yeah.
misleading, but I think that obviously the two reporters took that away from it, so.
I saw that in the Chronicle.
You can't have it both
Yeah.
ways, though. I mean, because when they tout using CPC money, they say to the taxpayers, well, it's not really, extra money, it's money that you've already paid.
Right.
And then you can't include it in something else.
else.
I mean, that's
Well,
like
it is
double
your-
dipping.
It is your tax dollars at work, but it isn't
Right, and
labeled, and I didn't
exactly.
think because,
Tax dollars in debt.
because I did these PowerPoints and things, and I should have had right on here CPC funded, because I usually save that, but that was gonna make the text really small, and so, but I don't think that I don't think the PowerPoint overall was misleading. I think, but a lot of her presentation was about debt, and so people just assumed it was debt. Anyway.
And Ginny, would you put some of these
Oh,
at the
yes,
library
thank
for
you.
us?
Love to. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. That looks great.
It
Thank
really
you.
does.
Thank you for your
All right,
report.
thank you.
Okay, town meeting recap.
Did all of them pass?
Yes.
Okay.
All the articles passed.
Oh, CPC articles.
Anybody have anything to say? We'll start with John.
I don't have anything to say about, other than it's great that they all passed, and there didn't seem to be much contention about any of it, probably because people have some understanding of where the money's coming from, as opposed to other rather contentious things that came up at town meeting, where people were obviously very concerned about spending money. That concern did not seem to be reflected that much. I forget, there was one article where there was some discussion. Which one was that? I don't remember actually now.
Museum Pond and affordable housing.
And how much debt was incurred
Right.
for all the articles,
Yeah,
what the total number was. So,
Right, well, similar reservations were expressed about the Sand Pond
Yeah.
thing that were expressed when we discussed them here, so that wasn't surprising. People are clearly very concerned about affordable housing in Harwich. That certainly was something that came through loud and clear.
all set?
Oh,
Chris?
Ginny wanted to say,
Ah.
Ginny was
I'm
saying.
sorry, I just wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
So, because I'm gonna write a letter to the editor, so I thought, gee, I should probably put in here this info session that you have. When is that? Are you doing that
Third-
in June, the public
June
hearing?
13th.
Okay.
6
Because
p.m.?
it would be
6
good to
p.m.
say, for people to come and also find out what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Who's my
Yeah,
Is that my eyesight or?
No, somebody didn't pay the electric bill.
I mean, go get a nitroglycerin or something.
Right.
You did you? You sure?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was, as a member of the committee, I was clearly pleased at the fact that town meeting moved through that section very quickly. And I didn't see any of the discussion as really negative, as much as just inquiries. and,
Inquiries, right,
For more
right.
information. The one gentleman who got up and wanted to understand how the past 6 warrants that had just been discussed were gonna be funded, clearly didn't get CPA, but at least he asked the question, and Carol, explained it, I thought, really well. So, I was a little apprehensive. I couldn't make the meeting Monday night. I was there Tuesday. I couldn't make it Monday, but I heard from people I know about how contentious it was in
That was
spots.
really a kerfuffle.
Yeah.
I love that word.
So I was a little apprehensive about it, but I think CPA benefits, CPA, CPC, I think those warrants benefit from the recognition factor. That is, people know stuff like Red River Beach and White House Field and Brooks Academy Museum, and affordable housing obviously had already been discussed at length the night before, so there are concepts that resonate with people, and maybe that adds a comfort factor, I don't know. But I was pretty pleased with the way it all went.
Kath?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still constantly amazed at how many people do not understand the concept of the Community Preservation Act funds. I mean, Tuesday night, I was sitting there and the women behind me were new to town, obviously, and they were sitting there talking quite loudly the whole time. Well, I don't know what this is, so I handed them the brochure over my shoulder.
In your own way.
perfect.
Yeah, I got
I
it.
said, yeah. But, I mean, I guess, God, as much as it's in the, in the paper reviewed every year, and I just don't know how to get people to understand this source of funding, I guess. And I think every year is different depending upon what's a hot
Yeah.
topic. I mean, we really vetted out our requests this year, and when we do that, we don't really have any pushback, so good for us.
Let me give the rest of the,
I just had a quick comment on
Mr.
that.
Doan?
Well, you can come back to me.
Yeah, so, I was very apprehensive too, and it did, everything seemed to go very well. Probably one of the things is this year we had enough money to cover everything, so people weren't shortchanged, so you didn't have that attitude of people coming in and says, well, why am I shortchanged, or why didn't I get CPC money? So I think that probably helped this year as one of the items.
Mary?
So I think Bob makes a good point on that. You know, we had the money, and I think that was really the basis behind the gentleman's question, was the anticipated revenue.
Yeah.
That he didn't understand what it meant with the anticipated revenue, and, I mean, we all struggled with that too initially. So it always comes down to, did you have enough money? And yes, we did, and as Carol said, there was more than enough, so
Capitalized is the term, yep.
there was more than enough. So we covered our projects, and they didn't have to think that they were going out. I do think that the brochure with the tax bill highlighting the 3% was a fantastic idea, because, yeah, I mean, I know I pay my tax bill. I'm not always looking at the bill. I go online, I pay it, it's done. And I think a lot of people do the same, and if you're not focusing on what that 3% is, you know, maybe that will be sufficient to start educating people on where the funding's coming from. Yes, it's your tax dollars, and you've already paid it, or you're going to pay it as a part of your bill anyway, so.
One thing I should point out, the previous year's funding was 16 articles that were 3 million plus. So we don't extend ourselves out of the realm of what the bucket of monies we have to work with. And again, this has been going on since '05. I don't understand why the concept is so tough to, go ahead.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I don't know what this committee did in prior years. I've been on it since 2012 or so, or 2011. But there's lots of towns that that's what they do in terms of the CPC funding also. I mean, Orleans is voting on Monday night whether to take on $1.5 million in debt for an open space purchase. So, I mean, that's, and they're selling it to the taxpayers as it's not gonna increase our current debt anymore, because as we're retiring a little bit of debt, it's just gonna add to and it's just gonna level off. So even though we're paying $75,000 for the next 20 years, it's not really gonna cost you any money. And I had a conversation with the chair of their committee, and I said,
Where does that come from?
that is a little deceiving, don't you think? I said, because
It's a spin.
it's a perception thing.
That's
But
exactly
lots of towns, and the reason I'm bringing this up is that we haven't had any debt, you know, I don't know what you'd call them, projects type thing for a long time, but that's not to say we shouldn't maybe consider them down the road if we had something that was something that was
It may be coming with the trust.
okay. Ooh. Well, anyway, it's certainly not we shouldn't dismiss it.
Chris?
Yeah, to Kathy's earlier point, two comments. One, I've been on record almost since I got on this committee that I thought that CPC was very poorly understood within the town. But the disconnect with that was how easily everything really moved along the other night. And as I was seeing that happen, I'm thinking, maybe people in the town really understand CPA more than I'm giving them credit for, because if they didn't understand it, I would have anticipated a lot more questioning. And the second comment I have was, it seemed to me that the moderator wasn't really as prepared on the CPC warrants as he was on other warrants. And that was a little puzzling to me, but it made me also think that that'd be a great spot annually for somebody to just do a quick recap of what CPA is all about. CPA
Take it away.
I can't.
We do that every year.
Oh, did we
But-
do it this year?
No, we did not. We were,
'Cause I would have missed it if we did.
I think in the interest of time, I think in the interest of, that there was a lack of controversial items, that they decided to forego the report. I wish we had had the report also, because it is a nice little wrap-up.
I'm not even, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying 3-4 minutes,
Yeah.
that just briefly.
We have it every year.
We do it every year, and the report is in the reflection of the book that's put out by the town,
It's in the warrant.
the warrant. It's there for everybody to read,
Okay.
and I'll move on. Anybody else?
Well, so I just like to respond to one thing Chris just said, which is, it's nice to think that there wasn't controversy because people or there wasn't a lot of friction because people understand what CPC is. I think it's more likely that people were way more wound up about other things.
I agree.
And whatever understanding they had was that this wasn't gonna come directly out of their pockets in a new way, so there wasn't any energy in it for the most part. And my feeling about getting people informed is being in the news more. And maybe we're gonna discuss that further on in the agenda, but if we start in earnest doing some structured planning, that may translate into coverage in the press and increasing people's awareness. It's speculation, I know, but it's a suggestion.
Anybody else? Kathy?
Just sort of like tacking on to the, trying to get people to understand. The brochure, John and I handed out as many as we could, but you are barraged with paper, and, you know, people did not want to take paper. So anyway, to that end, we want to distribute some of the brochures, and so this was my thought in terms of where we would put them. The library, the town clerk's office, the Chamber of Commerce, the community center, Council on Aging, and then I thought, if the realty companies were willing, the Harwich ones, if they prepare a packet for new residents in Harwich, it would be very helpful. So we'll see if we can get some of them to carry it. Is there anything else that anybody can think of that where we should put something?
I would think another place, where do they have, I know we have, outside the clerk's office, we have some of the field guides, but
Right.
isn't there one up here too,
Upstairs here?
upstairs?
Maybe, yeah.
There's a rack.
Up-
So,
so I can
so you
put
might
some up
wanna
here.
put some in this rack too.
Okay, so
What about HCT? Could they be a,
I gave them some.
oh, you did?
Yep.
Is there a new town committee for newcomers to the town?
Oh, there is the
Wasn't there?
Chatham Harwich Newcomers Club, and
They have a monthly meeting,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that they would be interested in passing it out.
yeah, maybe, I don't know how many people go to that meeting, but
Oh,
they
Yeah.
also have an email list where they broadcast emails all the time.
We can't do that.
I'll tell
Gotta
you
be
something.
really careful with
I'll
that.
tell you what, though,
How so?
We can send out a blast of information, but if there's any conversation back and forth.
Oh, I was just thinking about if there were a digital form of the brochure that it could get sent, you know, a one-way broadcast, not
Oh,
a
okay.
discussion or
All
anything
right,
like
all
that.
right.
Just, well, is it a PDF file? Of course, as a PDF file, it probably doesn't do very well on, what's that?
You're talking about I'm the least tech savvy person, so I don't know.
Sorry,
I don't know if it's
It
a
could be-
PDF.
Yes, it could be scanned and it could be.
It could be, right.
It could be scanned, or
Right.
it could be reformatted so that it would translate well into an email or something. I'd be
Right.
happy to help with that if, because I'm a technical guy. I'm not exactly an IT guy, but I'm a technical guy, so I would be happy to do that if the committee thought that was a good idea.
I don't think it's a bad idea, that's for
think
sure.
if there are mail lists, and I was thinking the town, you know, if the as far as I know, the town doesn't have like a broadcast email list where it broadcasts email to
No, I don't think.
Even
we
under
do.
emergency
registered
management,
voters
there's
or
no
anything
list
like
of
that,
num,
but-
It's not
think
email,
that's
it's phone
telephone.
calls.
That's
everything's phone, huh?
It's a phone thing.
Well, it could be, it
This,
could,
this may be beyond our capability.
well, it could be formatted so there could be a link to it on the town website. There is a link on the town website to information about the committees, all the committees, including this one. And we could easily put up a link
Yeah.
to a digital, an appropriately formatted version, the digital brochure that people, not that, I don't know how many people go to the town website.
A lot more than you think.
Yeah.
Well, then we should absolutely do that. And again, I would be happy to work with you guys who made the brochure to come
Okay.
up with a digital
Good
format
idea.
of it that could go on the website and potentially be sent in emails to organizations like Chatham Harwich Newcomers Club.
Yeah,
Well, along those lines, even better would be a one-on-one conversation. So if Chatham Harwich newcomers would be interested, it'd be great to get somebody from the Chatham CPC and the Harwich CPC, and to present together, you know, what the CPA is, and then what we both do in each town.
Good idea.
And then they could decide from that initial meeting if they wanted to broadcast anything to the rest of their membership. But I think it would be a great way to, you know, and they're probably always looking for a little programming.
Yeah.
Right,
Chris,
right.
They have monthly meetings, except in the summer, if I remember correctly. They're well-attended. They have a speaker at every meeting. I'm sure that they might be, I'm not sure, but I think there's a good chance that they would be interested in having a presentation on this. And I think the idea of co-presenting with Chatham is a good one, because there are members from both towns.
It could even be like a little government thing, you know, there could be a thing on, you know, small town government for people who are moving in, second-time homeowners versus, you know, what you pay and what you can or cannot vote, et cetera. I mean, there could be a little whole thing.
I'm laughing. The subcommittee is gonna begin with
No.
Kathy Green.
No.
Any other members?
Just throwing out some thoughts here, just throwing out some thoughts. Yeah.
You just ripped yourself into another.
No, I'm not doing that.
By the way, the membership of the Chatham Harwich Newcomers Club is not necessarily strictly newcomers.
That's right.
Right.
There are a lot of people who've been participating for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been
That's
here-
what I was thinking.
I've been
That's-
here 11 years and I've been in it for 10.
Yeah, see, it
And
might
I've
be a
been
good venue,
invited.
though. I mean, it would be a
Yeah,
great
so-
place to, when we talk about,
You're not a newcomer.
No,
when we talk about being more transparent and trying to get the word out, there would be a good place to
This
go.
works. Chris, would you be willing to,
What?
as the lights go out, and say your name, would you be willing to follow up with putting together some information for us so we can reach out to them?
Yeah, if you want, I can reach out. I mean, I know the guy who's going to be the next president, Dave Legendre. My wife knows him better than I do, but
I know David.
Yeah, so he's the next president. He succeeds Brian Parity, who is the president this year. So I can reach out to him informally to start if you want and ask him if he's interested.
That sounds, the board?
Sounds good to me.
That sounds good?
Yeah,
If you want something more formal to happen, then just tell me, but that's one way to start.
Okay, the other thing is, would you be willing to talk to Foster? To put,
Who's Foster?
Foster's the IT fellow from the town, on the
Sure.
website.
would it be the IT guy that did it, or not?
Well, so
Would it be,
it'd be Foster or Caleb and Jamie, so
What's your recommendation?
I'll talk to Jamie because I know
Talk
Jamie.
to
Okay,
Jamie.
there you go.
And I have no problem with that. Who knows, she may be watching right now. So
You
I'll
feel-
talk to Jamie, but also, I mean, the place I would start is looking at the source that you have that made that brochure and just figuring out how to reformat it so it would look good for somebody pulling it up on the web.
Okay, I don't know how to do that.
Well,
It was
So-
presented to us, if I remember correctly, in PDF format as well, I think.
Did you get an email of it?
I do have
From them?
it. I don't know if I still have it because I had the brochure.
Well, so,
I think I have it, though. I think I
Yeah.
have what you said.
If it-
The final?
Be all set to go.
I'll check.
Chris,
Yeah,
send
maybe
it to John, you take it from there.
sure. And if I need to, there probably will need to be a conversation, so
Not with me, though. That's fine. I'll send it.
with somebody
Yeah, yeah.
who, I mean,
If I have it, I'll send it. If I don't, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
okay.
I think
Fair enough.
We're just saying we're not tech savvy.
Yeah, but you made the original thing. And
Yeah, I cut and paste, no, I'm not talking cut and paste on there, I cut and paste. That's what, I mean, I could show you,
Literally.
literally, cut and
Paste
paste.
under her
I
fingernail.
probably have it here.
Then what, though? Then what?
That's
How did
fabulous.
it get from there to a
Okay, so
printer
then I
that
brought it to
printed
some, okay,
Went to a market.
just cut and paste.
She brought it to a printer
I
to get
I
typeset.
literally
Yeah.
typed it and set it up, and then I,
There you go. She wasn't kidding.
hey, when
just
I,
counted herself
when I
out.
brought this to the person who did the typesetting, she said she was very impressed because it was very organized, easy to read, and it was set up the way we wanted it.
Remember, she was being paid.
Oh, come on. Literally cut and paste, actually cut and staple.
Good job, Kathy. It worked. You got the job done.
Frankly, when I looked
So
at the brochure,
I've been
it
writing
came out well.
documents on computers since the early 80s, if
Okay.
not before. So I could even take your source, whatever that is, and format it, whatever.
I'm sure I got something on
I
the
don't think you
computer.
have to. It sounds like they have a.
Whatever.
I'll see what I have.
I'm happy to take that bit on.
Okay, you've got it, kid. It's all
That'd be
yours.
great if we could do that online.
And you'll talk to
Yeah,
Mr. Legendry? Okay. Is there anything else
On town meeting?
on town meeting? Mary?
I have been saying at every historic commission meeting, reminding people to go out and vote for the CPC project, so I am happy they all passed. They all went through. And hopefully it had more to do with people trusting that the projects were vetted.
I
And
think
necessary and less to do
that
with that they were just
encapsulates everything that happened with CPC.
Right.
There was
my-
a fundamental understanding of that money, the money is being cared for. So,
That is my hope. I'm going to put that positivity out there tonight after a long
absolutely,
week.
absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything else? Moving on. Discussion of the process of going paperless.
Didn't we just have that conversation?
I'm laughing.
By the way, the Conservation Commission is well along in that process and has been for the last several months. And, well, for me, because that's the way things worked in the working world where I worked for a number of years. And seems like really the best way to go unless people don't like computers at all, which there are such people.
Mary?
As the lawyer in the room, I still like to kill a tree. I still like the paper in front of me. I'm sorry. I'll take linen, I'll take cotton bond, I don't care. I'll take renewable resources. I don't mind. I don't need to. For me, the bigger problem is some of the plans and the pictures, when we get them.
And I'm gonna weigh in this right now, simply because I need to ask the secretary, what would that do for you?
I
What
have
would
to have
that-
paper.
No matter what.
Yeah,
Why do you say you have to have paper?
because
We
when
archive it.
the archives, like when Kathy's I mean, if we just forget everything, but when Kathy's needed to go dig up something, it's not on digital, and who knows what the digital apparatus will be in a few years, you know? I mean, because they keep changing things, and so 10 years from now, they may not have a thumb drive that we can pop in, and then they won't know what the applications look like or anything. So we have to have a record of everything,
Yes, there's a requirement.
Yeah, so
a physical. But we don't, I mean, I'm just saying, that might require 2 copies of everything. I'm just saying.
right, so
Alright.
when you say you need paper, you just mean you need paper to archive.
Yep.
Mary?
So, for example, under public records law, the committee is required to keep this. The clerk's office keeps agendas and minutes, but the committee itself is required to keep all of its own backup information. And it should be in paper form, because the paper, we can't get rid of it yet, according
And,
to
and,
standards.
I'm sorry.
I'm done.
When I took chair, I went looking for some information, and the information was dispersed everywhere. And it was very difficult to get a hold of it. So I asked the secretary to build a binder for every year, so we had records that could go to the library, to town hall, to Anita's office, and for us. Now, how it affects what you're looking for, I don't know. We still have to build those records. So based on now that you have that information,
I understand that there's there's a legacy of a requirement for paper copies. But in my opinion, the need that you just stated is a big reason for doing it digitally. So, because if you archive things in an organized way digitally, it's all in one place digitally. You don't have to go find the paper copies somewhere. Well, you guys are.
Unfortunately, if I may.
but hold on, let him finish. Let him, go ahead, Jim. You get the floor.
There's a way to do that, though. I mean, there may be a history of it being problematic, but you can do that. And most organizations are doing things that way. Like, when you file your taxes, I mean, unless you really want to do it on paper, you don't do it on paper, and people have to keep records. And I'm not saying we would become the IRS or anything like that, but I think it's rather easy to archive stuff online in the cloud where it's available to everyone, and I think that's the way the world is going. And we can either ignore that and stick with paper, or we can start moving that way without totally denying the legacy of
Let him finish.
needing paper copies, and I would strongly advocate that we do that.
Okay.
I'm done for the moment.
Chris?
I'm happy to work paperless, I'm happy to work with paper. It seems like now we kind of do a combination of the two. I sometimes just use the stuff on my phone that Jan sends, just depends on how I feel, but I'm comfortable with either one. I'm not the strong vote here either way.
Kathy?
Well, we know that there's a need for at least paper copies in the library, because I've accessed those past years myself. I take the warrant books and I use them and the applications themselves to research. 2, personally, I like to work on a hard copy. I like to read it, I like to mark it up. And if we were gonna have presentations, we would all have to have a laptop in front of us. And I really think there's some degree of it being impersonal, when everybody is looking at their laptop and reading and taking notes, and whoever knows what they're doing, rather than listening to the
You know, she
presentation.
just looked in this direction.
So, no, so I think there are some, I understand what you're saying, I think there's some positives, but I think there's some drawbacks too.
Mary?
My concern is really from the public records section. I understand where you're coming from. I worked for tech companies and we stored things in the cloud. We did it all. We were paperless. But unfortunately, on government side, we're ruled by the Secretary of State's office, and we can't just have the electronic copies. We have to have the hard copies as well.
But just-
So it's the reason we had the storage project in last year's
Right.
CPC. So that's kind of really where my concern is. From a practical standpoint, I'm like Kathy, I like to have paper in front of me. I don't object to the rest of it. I just, from the Secretary of State, records portion, I think we still need physical records
Bob?
to some degree.
So I do like electronic stuff. I'm still not used to totally using it. But the issue is that the town would have to, as a town, come up with an electronic archival storage system. Because if committees do it individually, there'll never be any consistency, particularly in indexing. That's the hardest of any archiving system. So if the town were to say, okay, we're gonna invest in an archival system, and all the committees will use it, that's good. Plus, if they do it right, it'll solve the issue about going forward 50 years from now, because these systems typically, if you get a new system, you move all the data and everything, and that solves it. But if you had every committee doing their own cloud or Google Docs, we've done that at work, it doesn't work.
Follow up, John?
Well, I don't know, I have questions more than anything else, but I don't think that individuals' needs or legal needs for paper copies, for hard copies, is in conflict with a goal to go forward and do this all digitally. That is, you can still have your paper copies and get it all done digitally. And I think that it is where everything is going to end up going. And so that's one thing. The other thing is, like I said, in the Conservation Commission, we're already doing this, and I get what you're saying, Bob, that if everybody does something different, it's a problem. And I don't, I don't know about any attempt on the part of Amy or Nikki to coordinate with anybody else in town what's being done. But everything is being made available online now, including, large planning. They scan it all, and I think they're requiring, submission digitally, or starting to go that way. So everything originates as a digital document, even if we're still required to work with some paper documents.
The difference is, you've got backup from the town, paid employees doing this work. This committee
Right.
doesn't. Kathy?
Might I offer a compromise, okay, as we try to move towards something like this? Presently, we run off about 20 hard copies of the application and all the attachments that go with it, and have them in the selectman's office. But now that we have the application online and it's fillable, then there really is no need for that. So might I say we don't have the hard copies at the selectman's office, and everyone be referred to the website and the town link to get the thing. At least eliminates 20 copies
Right, no,
for start.
Well,
Don't the applications typically have adjoining documents that are plans and things like that, that don't get digitized necessarily? even if the app
I mean,
is.
from the applicant,
Yeah.
Yeah,
from the applicant, yeah.
so I mean, you still have to worry about that, and some applicants won't have the capabilities to do that.
Well, I'm not suggesting that they not give us a paper copy.
Okay.
I'm suggesting that
We give,
we don't give a paper
Oh.
copy for the application and its attachments. That's only available online.
Well, you may not be suggesting that they don't give us a paper copy. I would suggest that. I would suggest that at least requesting, if not requiring, submission in original digital form. Again, it makes it easier, cuts down on paper use, and I think it moves more towards a standardized format, but it's only a suggestion. I would like to see that
just for the board
happening.
to know, we're now including this in the discussion of application revisions. So we're combining two here.
Okay.
Why don't we just solidify with the first discussion on the electronic process?
Well, one last comment on that is that the first step people should take is do double-sided printing, if they can. I mean, I do it at home all the time. When I print out my thing, the minutes there, it's all double-sided. And that saves half your paper right there almost, but that's almost a side topic.
Anything else from the board? Chris?
Well, I mean, before you move on, I think, you know, I don't know whether it requires a motion or not, but I think John has surfaced a worthy objective. And so I think whenever it's appropriate, we should probably question, you know, okay, we're going to use a paperless methodology, or we're going to do it in an electronic methodology. So I think it should be an objective that we pursue going forward. And Kathy's suggestion about the application, finding it online, maybe. even
Why don't you
submitting-
hold that for the application discussion?
I was just gonna say that.
Right, I understand. I understand. So, go ahead.
I'd just like to say one more thing, which is, I think the way to articulate the goal is to structure the application process or the process of submitting material to the committee in a way that it is straightforward and obvious for any applicant to submit the thing entirely in a digital form. If you don't want to even request that
And
be
that,
done.
we're drifting back to the application.
But I'm just saying,
But you said we combine
for
them.
the sake of.
We can do that when we discuss the application. I've got to follow.
All right, okay, fine.
Kathy?
Well, I was just going to say that with regards to not only applications being submitted, and talking about paper in general,
Yeah.
when we have annual reports, you know, the biannual reports, when we have someone come in and give us a update on something, you know, sometimes they send it to us digitally, but it's the responsibility of the committee member to open it before the meeting and read it, and that doesn't always happen. We used to have members who didn't even read the applications before the meeting, and they were reading them in the meeting. So without the hard copy, you know, nothing was gonna happen. I'm just saying, some of it's training, I get that, and some of it's a real effort, and some of it is just gonna be human
Nature?
nature, yeah.
But even if you get it digitally, you can print it yourself.
Right.
If that's what it requires, if that's what you require, read it in advance, not you, but anybody,
No.
you know, you can print it yourself.
Okay, everybody, hold this process in mind. Let's talk about the application now, the revisions. As part of the application revisions, I think your process is correct. I'd like to see it all digitized. How do we accomplish that? It's probably easy with the applications, but going beyond that, how do we digitize this information?
You scan it
It
into.
originated as a digital
Well,
document.
I understand that,
So-
but what I'm saying to you is,
the-
we
so-
don't have anybody to do that. It's all volunteers at this
Wait,
board.
wait.
Good.
I'm sorry,
Go
I'm
right ahead.
interrupting you. If that document originated as a digital document,
Right.
then it's less work for it just to be submitted as the original digital document. It doesn't require somebody here or anywhere else to reprocess it to get it into digital form because it's already in digital form. If people do not originate their documents in digital form, which I would guess is rather unusual these days, aside from preparing a trifold flyer for CPC.
There's a shot across the bow.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
But seriously, I doubt
It's okay.
many documents that are submitted here originate in anything other than digital form. So then it's just a question of that being transmitted digitally, hopefully as a PDF file, to us. And it's like way more straightforward than having to print it out, make sure you have enough copies, and, you know, churning out a bunch of paper, to me.
so, two things.
Mary,
If these were just pictures, Jenny could have cut and pasted like Kathy cut and pasted, and then just scanned them in, right? So scanning them, getting somebody to scan their documents in and submit them digitally isn't the bigger issue. What I do think is a bigger issue for some of the boards and commissions, and I think this is true of planning board, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. Planning board, zoning board of appeals, we require 12, 13 copies of plans to be submitted, large form, small form application. And the reason is because then the town doesn't have to pay for those copies for the board members to use. It's an awful lot of paper that volunteer board members are going through printing. So we don't, so when they're putting our application packets together, we're putting that onus on the applicant to give us the paper so that the town isn't paying for those copies. We don't have a lot of color copiers. We don't have a color copier down in the clerk's office. So for this to come through, in the manner in which the applicant wanted to give it to us, we, you know, let's say on planning board, if we're getting a set of plans for a new building in Harwichport, or in historic, if we're getting pictures where we want to see colors and details for the historic district, those committees, we ask for those paper copies so that the town isn't out the money for making all those extra copies and all those extra plans. So that's kind of why you have, on our side, we have so much paper. You know, I don't know if the same is true with conservation, but, you know, speaking for planning, that's, you know, I do know we stamp in that many copies in the clerk's office for planning board and for zoning board of appeals, so.
Bob,
No, I just exactly agree with Mary, because I was thinking of the.
well, that's why I called on you, because you were following the process.
Yeah, because it definitely is an issue for us, and we get a lot of last-minute stuff that would be sometimes more difficult digitally. Plus, I can imagine half of our applications are handwritten anyways. I'm not sure, you know, just because of the nature of, I don't know why we could force them to do it electronically.
I'm sorry, Bob, which committee are you
Oh, this is
speaking of?
historic commission.
Oh, it is historic, okay.
Yeah.
I'm the planning board rep now.
You are?
I am.
Yeah, she is.
That change happened a few months ago.
I told you that.
Okay, okay.
But talking about the application, I have no problem in asking them to submit it electronically anyways, because those usually have a lot more thought and process to go through. I think, you know, that would not be a burden, certainly on the end user, to submit them electronically and bring paper copies on their applications if there's a lot of extra detail.
Okay, now, you're talking to a layperson. From the beginning, it's always the simplest format to present to the
Please
public
make
to
it
get
known.
the information back.
I took over
Does what your
Jim's.
suggestion
Jim's, and I have the.
going
what
forward
was Jim's
fit
term.
that requirement?
Ends in June-
I
ends
guess I'm
June 30th.
confused. I'm talking about the specific applications that come to us. Is that
That's
what you're
right.
talking?
Is it,
So then-
so my question is it easier to provide it in an electronic format than it is in a paper format?
For the end user?
Yes.
I don't know. I think normally they are typing up, and definitely plans are always digitized unless it's a handwritten plan. And almost all multifunction scanners all scan now, so there's no reason why they can't put it in a PDF.
Right.
Definitely. The good thing is
So the
that it's
day of the
easier
napkins
if you-
are all gone by the boards.
So, yeah, so the good thing is that it makes it, if we want to publish those on our webpage of all the application, it makes it very simple. We don't have to scan, we don't have to do anything. We just take the documents and post them.
And if you're preparing a document in Microsoft Word, which, like, probably the majority of documents start that way, you can ask it to print it out into a PDF file. It's
Right.
very
It's-
Yeah,
straightforward.
we'll just
everybody
save it
has
as a
this
PDF.
So,
Very easy.
Provided everybody has,
A PC.
Chris,
I think it would be logical to make the application accessible online, if it's not already, I don't even know.
It is.
it
It
is.
is, right? Okay. So the application's accessible online. It could certainly be submitted electronically, and then there could be a requirement in place, at least for the time being, to continue to bring copies with you, since not everybody on this committee is gonna be switching over to paperless right away. So, to me,
The
that's.
experiment of the period of time.
Yeah, I mean, you submit it electronically, Jan distributes it electronically. Any of us who want to then print it for ease of use can do that, as I'm sure gets done today. And you ask the people to continue, at least for the next round maybe, to bring paper copies, so that anybody who wants to work on paper can work on paper. And if you don't want to work on paper, you bring your laptop with you, or your phone, or whatever, and you just work electronically during the meeting. And, but Kathy, by the way, raised a point of decorum earlier, which is important, which it's not very respectful to have your head down typing the entire time that somebody is presenting. I mean, that's just, to me, that's common sense, but I don't see so much typing necessarily as reading. But anyway, that's up to the individual user as far as I'm concerned. But you can certainly begin to engender a paperless environment by making people fill out the application online, add whatever has to be added to it visually or support-wise, and then submit electronically, and then go from there. That's all eminently doable. Now, you may have some applicants out there who can't do it. They just don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the ability, they don't have the knowledge.
So they fall back on.
So I think then, I mean, are we at the point where, we're not Estonia, where nobody does anything on paper, everything is digital, every single thing in a person's life is digital. We're not Estonia, we're Harwich, and so what happens with applicants who can't do it, physically can't do it? They're gonna have to be able to do it on paper for the time being.
So before we go any further, would you have an issue with that?
3 things. They can submit if they wanted to, and y'all can decide if you want to print out or not, or however you want to handle the meeting. But for Mary's point, we need to have several hard copies. I need to collect, and then I give to the town clerk, to the library. I keep one for the minutes, the physical minutes, and then because the applications are so important, that's the reason I'm always begging for more copies, so I can keep one as like the master of the world. Now, on Chris's point, for the blokes who cannot do something online, they can still submit it. Just take it and I scan it, and then I have a digital format of it. Y'all would get it, and we would have the master digitally.
You're comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing is these reports that we've started doing, just FYI, these reports, the reason I'm begging more is because one goes in the minutes, and then one of these goes to the, like, this was what, 2016? What was this application?
2016,
2016.
So it is going back
in the
in my
2016.
hard copies. So when I'm dead and gone, and somebody's trying to research whatever happened to those Roger Group statues, they're not gonna know that in May of 2019, we had a report. It's in my minutes, and this will be in the minutes, but this is attached to that application. And that's, I think, an easier way of doing the world of research. But I don't think the reports, I don't think y'all need a zillion copies. I just need some hard copies, whether it's the reports or whether it's the applications. And the last thing I'll say is, when they come with their paperwork on these applications, we say 12. They never want to give us 12. There's some that just want to give us all their paperwork, and there's others that just hand them out one by one. So I think that's one way you can cut down on paperwork, is figure out how many people you really have on this committee for that particular year. Make sure I get 2 extra copies just for me, then the town clerk and the library and the master file. See how it counts up? Just don't forget I need those real hard copies.
If we had a membership, full membership of 9 members, which we're supposed to,
But,
and then the extras, that's 12 right there.
Right.
So-
but I don't know if we're gonna have 12.
Yeah, but we'd have to do 12 because we don't know in any given year.
Right, but I'm just saying, you could cut.
Mary?
One other consideration is how it's going to get submitted electronically. So sometimes applications are too big for our emails, for the town email, and it'll block them. So that's the only other consideration, is we have to figure out how big that email, how big of an email can be accepted, because scanning pictures is we all know, take a lot of space
These bits, yeah.
and could get kicked. So the only concern I have with the electronic submittal is ensuring that it's going to be sufficient for somebody submitting, because we all know everybody submits at the last minute. If it's electronic, and I'd be the first one, if it's due at 10 PM, I might be emailing it at 9:50. If it bounces back, what are you gonna do? So, so that's the only other consideration, you know, like accounting offices have like a Citrix where they have a file upload, and you can upload whatever you want because
Right.
they've invested in that, in the product to do that. I don't think, you know, I don't think we need anything like that, but I'm just saying, we would need to do a little investigation to see how we can upload electronically, whether we're relying on email or doing something else.
Very good point.
John?
So, in the Conservation Commission, we're using Dropbox. I don't know actually what Amy is doing in terms of requiring the submitters where they're putting the digital stuff, but Dropbox can be used in that way. Google Documents can be used in that way. There may be other, there's Citrix, there's other products where it's not the same as Dropbox or Google Documents. It's like some website you go to and you say, I want to upload this document.
So I understand that, and my concern with that, from a legal perspective, is using all of these products, because Google owns everything you put out there. So,
Yeah, sure,
so
I
from the
understand.
legal perspective, those kinds of things to me need to be vetted by internally with a contract.
Okay, so
So, and that's just, I mean, that's something we could look into.
I get
I
it.
just,
along with volunteering to figure out how to come up with a digital form of the brochure that can go on the website. I will volunteer to look into open source, public domain, web utilities for just uploading documents that can be put there. I don't know if that's a reasonable thing to expect is out there or not, but I will look into it and report back and see whether it's something we could consider for a way to do document submission.
Hands are hand up.
Kathy?
I get all this, but I still think that, you know, we still have applicants that hand write the application, like the rec department, of which my recommendation would be that we don't accept handwriting anymore because you can't read it. It should at least be typed, okay? Now, I have no problem with them doing it, you know, online and submitting it, but then, you know, for somebody like me who I can't tell you how often I access the hard copies in any given year and in past years. Like, I could come up with anything in the last 8 years that I've been on the committee, you know, and it's a lot quicker and easier to just my applications, minutes, agendas, okay? Now, at some point, I'll get rid of all those, but, you know, I mean, I would have to then copy everything for myself, because it's just, I like to have the hard copy.
I don't think anyone's suggesting you wouldn't get a hard copy. I think what's being suggested is there be some requirement stated for the number of copies that be submitted, hard copies. And part of that determination of that number is how many people on the committee need to have a hard copy. I mean, we have to accommodate everybody, everybody's working style here, right? I don't think anybody's suggesting we wouldn't be doing that. I'm certainly not suggesting that. So there are hard copies. It's just trying to set the system up so that it can evolve into a digital thing and acknowledge the fact that most documents already are prepared digitally anyway. And I don't know what the problem is with the rec department. Why, do they not have computers?
I don't know, talk to the rep.
I'll have a discussion with the rec director.
There you go. I mean, you know, it used to be that the chairperson of the committee used to stand in the selectman's office at 4 o'clock on the day that the applications were to be, was the cutoff, and they would literally be handing them to them at 4 o'clock. I mean, like, or 2 minutes
And they
to.
still run in and drop them up at
Yeah,
4
and
o'clock.
I go in at 4 o'clock and pick them.
Yeah, so I mean, there's still that element. Now, of course, you know, we have, electronics is it's the way to go, I get that.
Well, does the board want to make a decision on this tonight, or do we want to bring this back for another?
Is there something to decide tonight?
This member of the board doesn't have the brain, the
Well, do
capacity. to make a
Kathy's
decision
first
right
suggestion
now.
about not making 20 hard copies for the selectmen's office handouts. That's that.
First, we have to come to a conclusion about the application.
All right,
Okay, and then second, we need to have this up by July 1. So, you know, just as a,
wow,
well, just as a point of reference, so,
okay.
all right.
So let's
So,
continue with the applications.
right, can I just
Yeah.
talk then? So, I don't know if everybody, like, had time to review the application that we handed out the last meeting, the hard paper copy. So aside from changing dates, et cetera, Mary did send me the one that I could change online. I did update it with appropriate dates, and the other things that I changed that we had discussed were, instead of calling one of the sections guidelines,
Move your mic just back, that's, yeah,
Is that what it's
not
back?
that far, but that's what it's crunching.
instead of calling it guidelines for the application, I changed it to terms and conditions. That was one thing. Another thing was we changed the people contacts.
You've got the chair for a moment.
Okay, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 people. And Bob, do you want your name down as Robert or Bob?
Bob's fine.
Okay. Okay. And then there was a section where it talked about the progress reports, and I changed it to reflect our September and March instead of just saying biannually. So it says the applicant shall provide the town through the Community Preservation Committee with progress reports twice a year at the September and March meetings from the date this project is officially funded, in this case, July 2020, for so long as the funds remain unexpended and with final notification within 30 days after completion of the project.
Say
So-
that again, Kathy.
Yeah, it's really just saying that I just changed the wording from biannual to progress reports twice a year at the September and March meetings,
Okay.
from the date that this is officially funded, which is July 2020 is when this would be. Then we had talked about having, changing the, I don't know how to say this word, attestation?
So,
Is that how you say it?
yeah, or the signature, just the
I
execution.
know, but how do you say that word?
Attestation.
Oh,
You said
okay,
it right.
I wasn't sure. Okay. We talked about that, and Mary was gonna prepare something, so I'll let Mary talk about that right now.
So yes, I did not get this to Kathy early enough, but my thoughts on the language that we'd put into the application. By signing below, the applicant represents and warrants that all information included is true and correct to the best of signer's knowledge and belief. Further, the applicant acknowledges, in the event that the Community Preservation Committee agrees to grant funds to applicant, subject to town meeting approval, this application, together with any terms and conditions, constitute a binding agreement between applicant and CPC.
Okay, can you just read that again from the
Yep.
top for Dave?
So by signing below, the applicant represents and warrants that all the information included is true and correct to the best of signer's knowledge and belief. Further, the applicant acknowledges that in the event that the Community Preservation Committee agrees to grant funds to applicant, subject to town meeting approval, this application, together with any terms and conditions, constitute a binding agreement between the applicant and the Community Preservation Committee. Further, applicant acknowledges and agrees to execute any additional grant agreement should the Community Preservation Committee so request.
Can I see a copy of that?
Chicken scratch.
So last year's application, we had a section right before the signature that said new requirement, and it was about the biannual reports. I think we can take that out now because it is in our terms and conditions.
Yep.
And most of the people who have made application and will continue to do so are aware of it now. So I think we can take that out. And then, instead of this attestation, then we have this statement, or if we agree to this statement.
If you want, you can email me the application, I can just add that to the end of it.
I'm gonna email to you, but I want to have a conversation with you, because there's
Okay.
a couple things that didn't come out right in it.
Okay.
It's the formatting,
Probably when it got converted.
yeah. So, and I don't know how to change it.
Okay. Okay.
So what,
I do my best.
what you're saying in this,
So this
Is-
is just for the application. So essentially, the applicant is agreeing that the application is a contract between us and them, and that they're providing they're providing information to the best of their knowledge and belief. So they're telling us the truth. They understand that what they've represented to us is a contract between us according to that application and the terms and conditions that are included. And then thirdly, if we ask them to sign a separate grant agreement, that they're agreeing that they will. So if this board decides that the trust should sign a grant agreement with us, then they would sign an additional document in addition to and then the grant agreement would need a couple of additional provisions so that it's all.
so could this
Incorporated.
application be used in lieu of a grant agreement?
So,
Because you're
the
using the
application-
terminology of.
correct. So the application would be considered a unilateral contract between us and them. They're signing it, so they're bound by their representations and warranties
So
to
the
us.
answer to that is yes.
So yes, the application is a contract. If we get to the point where something is more detailed and more complicated, and I think a situation like the trust is a
Trust.
good example, that we go for a grant agreement, the grant agreement would also incorporate by reference the application and any terms and conditions into that agreement, and that would have a priority clause that would say, in the event of any disparity between this agreement and the application, the agreement governs or the application governs, we would look at it and decide what we'd want to govern. So maybe there are certain circumstances where you might want the agreement
Go-
to,
right.
other circumstances where you might want the application to.
Does everybody see this? Has everybody seen this?
And
No.
that may need
No,
a
she
bit
just
of
read it.
tweaking.
Read it.
No, I
I
know
just
that. That's what I
chicken
mean.
scratch.
I'm a visual guy. I want to see what's,
I'm a hard gal myself, so.
And that needs a bit of polish, but that's essentially what I think we can get away with putting at the end of the agreement.
Sounds very legal.
not
Thankfully.
away with, please.
I'm sorry? Did I say something? Apparently I did.
That was a you bad.
I don't know what I just said, okay.
Does that seem
Right.
fine with you, Joe?
I'm, I need to sit with it a little bit. I mean, I was concentrating, trying to understand everything you were saying, Mary, but I need to read it and then think
Go
about
right
it and
ahead.
read it again.
I'm the
So-
same way, John.
And I'll send it to
So I
um,
understand that. I am the
okay.
same way.
What would suit me would be if this got edited into the application.
The
and then-
secretary's gonna type that out and
Yeah.
send it to
It
all
was
of
Yes,
us.
my
that's-
intention. It never happened this week.
Okay.
Yeah, I get it.
I mean, the thing is I didn't want to like print out another copy, hard copy, of the current application with the corrections, because it's
Thank you.
19 pages long with
That's
all the parts to it.
You guys want to see this right now?
Bob, you wanna
So,
see-
I'm,
trying to save paper.
I am
Yeah, if
fine.
I can, I'll steal that from
I
you
listened.
I
tonight.
listened, Mary sounded
And then
great.
I'll send it to everybody.
We can take a
So,
last look.
but
Yeah.
Would that be all right?
what's gonna happen here is,
Oh, yeah, I'll take a picture.
Hold on,
I can
hold
take a
on.
I'm gonna take
picture.
your changes and edit them into another draft.
No, I
which-
think what Jan's gonna do is she's gonna send a copy of that
Of just that.
statement.
Just the
But
statement.
then, if you want, once Mary and I complete the changes to the fillable application,
Application.
we can send that to everyone electronically, and you can review that.
I'll send it to you.
The
Chris,
problem is,
So-
I hate.
hold on, hold on, hold
That's
on.
good, I like it.
Chris,
Okay.
So Kathy, I did read through the agreement and I have some comments.
Okay, great,
And
great.
so if you give me a couple of
Go
minutes,
ahead,
I can
Chris.
probably go right through
Yep.
them.
All right,
Some of them are really just cosmetic.
all right, well, let me just see if I can find my copy. Okay, shoot.
Okay, so on top one, page 3, at the top of the page,
Yep,
the last bullet, I think separate in parentheses is misspelled, I think it's S-E-E.
oh, yeah,
Hold on.
good catch, all right.
this is the edited version.
Part 2,
Mm-hmm, yep,
okay, you fixed the timing stuff. I
yeah.
don't think I heard you or Mary address a question. And I'm on top 2, page 2, the middle paragraph there. Do we need any kind of a maximum, is there a maximum period during which the funds have to be expended?
well, I think we say that
Read.
a start date, a stop date, and I think there's like a 3 years there, something,
That's right.
somewhere.
It's in there somewhere.
I didn't see, I don't.
Is it in
I think it's in
the terms and conditions?
it's, you know what, I think it might be in the application.
I mean, I've seen that somewhere before, but I didn't.
Yeah, I can't remember. The thing has been bandied about a few times.
I think it's a good idea to have that in, if it's not already in, so that people understand that there's a statute of limitations on this stuff.
It's on the first page of the application. 3 years from the release of funds, and then we put in the year,
So
July
that's- right,
2019.
that's the
Funds may
following
be
year. There we go.
rescinded automatically, so the first page.
All right,
Okay,
got
okay.
it, thanks,
the
Jan.
app.
All right.
I knew there was some
Okay, where
place.
are you now?
At the bottom of that same page, why do we have asterisks beside urgency and affordability? They don't seem to refer to anything.
Because that's just the way it was before, and we were trying to condense it, so that's all.
Why don't we kill the asterisk? Because when I see an asterisk, I go looking for what it refers to, and there's nothing there refers
Oh,
Were you
yeah,
an
well,
English major?
to. Yeah.
they should just be other, like, bullet points.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all. I mean, hey, I retyped this whole thing a couple years ago.
These are asterisks.
I
On the
mean, with a typewriter?
No, on the computer.
Type.
Some people.
Poor Kathy.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, next page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the little note at the bottom of the page, which is actually up at the top. After the comma, so we made the opportunity.
Oh,
Something missing.
yep, good.
Wow.
So we may have the opportunity? No. Yeah,
I don't think so.
So we may discuss, I think, is what, so we may discuss the opportunity to review it for eligibility. I think the word discuss is missing.
you think? Might not have been discussed. But I will put that in, go ahead.
That sounds
Reject,
excellent.
Reject.
No, so we may
Okay, next
discuss
page.
everything, yep, go ahead.
Item 6, I think you need the word with after please indicate. Please indicate with which town committees, if any, this request has been discussed.
Okay,
He reminds me of a professor I had.
yeah, go ahead. This is good.
Really?
Thing or two.
This is good. You don't know how many times, years I've asked for this thing to be reviewed and nobody says anything. Okay, so this is great, because I'm not an English major, so go right ahead.
Okay, so number 9, entities or individuals.
Oh,
that are-
number 9 is the thing that we were talking about either eliminating, because it talks about, it's sort of this grant thing.
Yeah, that's.
So were we gonna take that out? We had talked about it at the last meeting. Because it says entities or individuals that are not Town of Harwich departments, agencies, or subdivisions shall have a contract executed with the Town of Harwich for purposes of implementing an approved project. So do we wanna leave it in there, or do we wanna take it out?
So I think you can deal with it either way. You can either leave it in, or you can just put the language that's at the bottom of the page.
I would take it out. It's redundant.
Take it out, okay.
It
we're
just
done. All
says,
right.
at our discretion.
Consider it gone,
Gone.
keep going.
Okay, the applicant information page, the
Yep.
first one.
Mm-hmm,
At the bottom, estimated state date, I think it's supposed to be estimated start date.
yeah,
Oh, thank you, Jan, there's the 3 years, that's what you were talking about.
okay,
Okay, so 3 years from the release of funds, great.
Okay.
That's fine.
yep,
Next page,
yep.
historic. Okay, yeah, so historic, this application is for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and/or restoration of historic resources. And as such, the following entity has declared it a historic resource. What is supposed to happen?
Mary?
I think in that instance, it's supposed to be that HDHC had reviewed the application or another entity, but I don't know. So we ran into this problem 2 years ago. This committee had requested that all historic applications come to the historic HDHC for approval before they came here. And that didn't happen probably 3 years ago. And some of the things that are historic aren't necessarily under the HDHC's purview. Some things may have been more appropriate to go to somebody else.
I thought this was referring to like a national recognition.
I don't think so. I think the initial was,
CPA, it's CBA, can I just talk about this?
Yes.
Okay,
please,
Well, there's something that is missing in this whole piece, and that is They don't have to go to an outside source, like historic, before they bring it here.
Well, that
So you
was
wanna-
not
Wait.
understood, but that was
Okay,
not
okay.
the way it was represented to people before I was on this board. I got many comments.
That was a different
I understand that, but, and I'm saying,
regime.
I understand that, but I'm saying it was represented to me by former members that I sat with on this
I
committee.
understand, I'm just
Who
telling you what the
said-
CPA requirements are,
Right.
and you
but-
can read those for yourself. So, I get it,
Right, so my point is, I think that section was, my only point is that I think that section was referring to, did it come to historic
I think the
for their approval
But
or
not,
endorsement?
I think it's not, okay, it's not a question of approval or anything like that. It's a question of whether it is a historical resource. So in other words, whether, if you qualify as a historic project for CPA funding, okay, it either has to be on the state register of historic places, or your local historical
Historic.
commission has to make a determination that the resource is significant in the history, archaeology, architecture, or culture of your city or town.
But I'm gonna clarify that that's for historic specific,
Right,
Correct.
doesn't include all the other
No.
entities.
No.
And that's where the catch was.
So here's my only comment, I'm gonna, if I may, to
Go ahead.
Mr. Doan, the situation like the Rogers statues, I personally don't know that the Historic District Historical Commission is an entity that would say, yes, those are important to our town. They are, clearly, but I don't know that that's usually in, what's in our purview.
No, I mean,
So that's kind of, for me, where the disconnect is. There, it's a library connection, but what the Historic District and the Historical Commission deal with are buildings of 100 years of age and certificates of appropriateness for historic districts. And the colors and the buildings and the like and feel of the district.
but when we're looking for some expertise, or some something to work
Yeah.
with, I think it's safe to assume that you guys would be able to tell us whether it has significance to the town. Like, if
Okay.
somebody wanted, if the library
But you
wanted
just
to,
said that that's not the case.
well, is it not in your description at all that you look at anything other than buildings?
yeah,
I
well,
mean-
grounds, but no, what's in a building, not really,
We,
even in
so
the historic district.
in a historic district, our
You're talking about the
charge,
historic commission.
right.
Right, it's it's one.
So it's one thing now.
Right, but
It was
under the
combined.
commission part.
So really what we do are notices of intent, which is the 100-year-old buildings outside the historic district. Any building
We've
that's
gone
100,
beyond.
that's 100 years of age or older, or in the district. And we're looking at we're looking at the 100-year-old buildings for whether they are historic to the town and whether the structure's important. And in the district, the like and feel of the district.
Right.
Okay,
Chris,
but for purposes of the application.
Right,
I
exactly.
would just recommend that we change the sentence to say something along the lines of, please indicate any entities that have declared this project to be of a historic nature, or, have formally declared this project to be of it. I think what this sentence is asking for is for them to fill something in after it, which legitimizes that it's historic.
Yeah, that's what the CPA
A.
is requiring.
Right.
Okay, but I don't think this language is clear.
Okay, maybe it isn't, but what I'm saying is, we can't just disregard that.
I'm just saying, I
Well,
think it needs to be.
what I think what Mary's saying, though, is that it doesn't come under their purview. According to the state CPA, according to the CPA, most local historic commissions must have this as something that they do.
So I'm gonna defer to the historic person.
Right, and that, I agree, if they state that should be, right now, the best vehicle is the Historic Commission. But in our charter, we really don't have that, saying that's what we do, and really, we should probably update our guidelines to say that we will review CPC applications for historic.
Well, just, can I give an example?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, okay, for example, say the library comes to us and says, we want to submit an application where we can digitize the last 3 years of the Cape Cod Times, 2015 to 2018. And they think it has historical significance, so they're applying for funds under the historic area, or, you know. Now, to me, I would say that's not historic, but I'm not the one that's doing the deciding. It would have to be the historic commission.
I understand that. We faced some of those issues with last year's applications,
Right.
not this year's. And again, on that, I would say something like what Mr. Powers had said when he was on, we were talking about digitizing the town hall records. When, at the time the record is made, you don't necessarily know whether it's going to be historic or not.
Right,
So there is a need to preserve
right.
for that future thing, maybe, you know.
But
maybe
there
the-
are guidelines.
I understand that. I
That talk
understand that.
about how you determine whether documents are historic resources.
So all I'm saying is on the application, we just need a sentence that is more clearly states that we need them to tell us how it has been determined that this is a project of historic.
Right, but we can't do that if we don't have the historic
No, but
commission
there
who's
are-
willing
there-
to,
But there
No,
are
but-
places, I'm not saying they exist in Harwich, but there are places, for example, that have been declared historic by the National Register of
well,
Historic.
that's a whole different thing, though. I mean,
Right.
if you're on the registry, you're on the registry,
Yeah.
whatever the thing is, but it's all this other stuff.
Yeah, okay, but okay, I'm just trying to solve the
I'm
application.
gonna shut up and let Mark talk.
Yeah, but we can't solve the application problem if we don't have a place for the,
Well, and is the rules on the state that it should be a town committee that recommends it, or is that just a suggestion?
No, it's specific.
it's,
That's not a
it's
recommendation.
a local historic
Yeah.
commission
Yeah.
makes the
I mean, that makes it
determination.
very clear
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
that
then
has
it's
to
the
do it.
historic, yeah.
Right.
Now,
then
And we
that's
just
fine.
have to.
Would you agree that
incorporate
historic,
that's fine.
historic area hasn't had a plan or
Correct,
something for a while?
absolutely.
They need to update
Right.
their,
Bring
Then-
that to attention to our meeting.
That's
Yep.
right.
Next week.
Okay.
And then that
I
clarifies the
Agree
issue.
with
Okay.
Bob wholeheartedly
That's
on
not
that.
unlike other issues.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm
Yep.
just saying,
Yep.
can we assume, all right, as a committee, that you will
It'll-
accept the job of,
As
at
the chair,
least-
I'll say absolutely.
you know, reviewing these and giving them a yay or a no in terms of your understanding of what falls under the purview of historical resources?
So absolutely, and that's what we did last year. We had some things where, you know, the stones, the cataloging of the oracle, the cleaning of the cemetery stones. Those were things that weren't necessarily things that would ordinarily come before us, but for the CPA funding, and we did. We made sure that we had those
Okay,
meetings.
perfect example.
We
The
have
rails, the rails, the
Absolutely.
fence rails.
Yes,
So that had to be
Just,
researched.
exactly, exactly.
We have Brooks Academy in the future.
Yes.
Chris, does that help you along with what you're trying to do?
Yeah, yeah, but part of what I'm trying to do
Okay,
really is
so
clean up.
tell me, right, but I wanted to make sure that we have someplace for this, and for them to get signed off on, so to speak.
All right, so how would we clean up the language?
Yeah, how do we clean up the language?
Okay, so there is a block down below it that I think allows boards and committees and organizations to approve, right?
Yep,
But
yeah,
up, the sentence that I flagged,
right,
I would just say, something like, please indicate here, the entity that has, reviewed this project and classified it as historic in nature.
I think you can just say, has the Harwich Historic District Historical Commission
Review.
reviewed and given approval or
Absolutely.
endorsed the project?
Great,
So-
yep.
I think
because
it's
if it's
fine.
on the National Historic Registry, we're gonna know it, okay? It's all the other stuff.
Okay,
Right.
great, it's fine.
All right, so what you're saying is that,
So has the Historic District Historical Commission,
okay,
Reviewed.
as the HDHC,
Well, I wouldn't make it a question. I would just say, your submission of this application,
In this case-
confirms that the HDHC has reviewed and approved, this project.
But
In
we
this
didn't do that last year, this past year, because we gave them extra time to come
Right.
before us.
Correct.
So,
But it's really important here, I think, because
So,
otherwise I could say my
it
backyard
is.
was historic.
right,
Yeah.
but what we did last year with this current year is we let people come in, up until like December or whatever, 2 years ago,
Two year-
whatever,
2
whatever
years
it
ago,
was.
yeah.
We gave them,
This year.
we gave them the extra time. So,
What's important about this, okay, is that, you know, we're requiring that something be determined a historic resource, okay? Unfortunately, that puts the onus on your committee, and people have to plan accordingly
Right.
to get on an agenda, et cetera. Now, in the past, this had been a problem 3 years ago, because there were not frequent enough or enough quorums at the HDHC meetings, so there were applicants that said they couldn't get on the agenda, okay? And this is where the rub came, okay? You're obviously better attended
A
now,
full
et cetera, et
committee.
cetera. So, and that's great. But I think it comes where, you know, people, they leave to the last minute to submit the application without knowing if they've taken, and we've tried to give them this information ahead of time. So how do we write this
Right.
and don't put you guys in a situation where you've got, 10 applications stacked up?
please
You know-
provide the date on which the Historic District and Historical Commission are reviewed and endorsed your project.
But you guys say it right here. You actually have them give their initials.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
But you want different language up top, so,
Well, it says the following entity, and it's asking them to, so if we leave that sentence there.
I don't know what that even means, the
Yeah, so
following
what it's
entity.
asking them to do, Kathy, is to write in the name of the entity after it, but it's not clear. I
Okay.
believe that whoever.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
right.
so, and as such, please indicate the entity that has declared that has declared it a historic resource. Even if we make that simple change, that at least tells them what the action is.
Okay, so you're saying, and keep in and as such?
Yeah, and as such, please indicate the entity that has declared it a historic resource. That way we don't have to make a big change.
Hold on, Bob.
I do have a problem, because that makes the assumption the people don't have to come to the historical commission. I think it, and really, the person, so it's on the landmarks historic, that's important for the historic commission to know, not necessarily for you to know. You just want to know that we agree with it, and that's the reason why.
I think that's great. I thought what I was hearing was that you guys didn't really have the time to do that.
No.
No,
we-
no,
they-
not,
they
no,
want-
they're
they're
saying it on
accepting
exact
the-
opposite.
They're
Right.
just saying,
Want-
yeah.
Oh, okay, then I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so, all right, now I have
Yeah.
no idea what you guys want me to write here.
What should she say, or?
Well,
So-
I just think it should be a statement that it has gone before the Harwich Commission and District.
So please provide the date on which the HDHC reviewed and endorsed the application.
That's fine.
As a statement, not a question.
As a statement on, and not a
Yeah.
question.
So please provide the date,
On which
on which
HDHC
HDHC
reviewed and endorsed your application,
This
this
application.
application.
okay.
And then you could put a second and say, if HDHC has not yet provided such approval, please provide the date on which you expect to have this completed. And then it gives us the option to say, to,
If they haven't provided approval, please,
please indicate the date on which approval is anticipated.
So,
okay, but,
So then it
Hold
gives
on,
us,
hold on,
that,
hold
that
on.
would only give you we decide to give them
Okay.
the extra month. it'd
Is
give you the extra-
anticipated.
Yes,
why,
then we can ask the question.
And you
John,
want that
hold
up
on,
here.
Hold on.
It's
John,
why wouldn't you state affirmatively there that approval of HDHT is required prior to submission of this proposal?
Because my only comment is that it was the last application, it was this year. We gave people until December 15th instead of
it was 6,
October, instead of October 10th, because we didn't have a meeting. And the comment was.
you're exactly right.
And the comment was, we've only got one meeting. Nobody had an opportunity to really come in. We were requested to postpone for 2 weeks by administration, the deadline, which we did. And my comment at the time was,
Right.
I've only got one meeting. So we gave people the opportunity to at least have 2 months, 2 meetings to come before us, because nobody had actually come before us yet. And, you know, the library, of course, had gotten review approval from us with their first application and hadn't, you know, so
There's a dependency here that may be out of the applicant's control.
I get.
to some degree.
You're right, exactly. I get the dependency. The question is, and maybe allowances will have to be made in the future, but sort of suggesting in the application itself that, you know, you can delay and delay and delay, and then accommodations will be made, seems like the wrong approach to me. It's like, we ought to be
I'm providing an
trying.
alternative. If the board doesn't like it, it's fine. We can leave the affirmative statement and put a period on it. I'm simply offering it an
Okay,
alternative as
okay.
well. That's all.
Bob,
So this, for instance, that question's buried in the application pretty far. Do we have a key checkoff list at the very front of the application saying the key points that you have to follow? And if that was on there, just saying all relevant committees have to approve before you submit this application as like the first thing, then people may
but
get into it.
that's not a requirement except for
Historic.
historic.
Oh, is that the only one?
Yes.
Okay. But I'm just saying in terms of
We would
general
like
thing,
it.
are there key points
Yeah,
that?
we
We
make our
like it. In other words,
Yeah.
we expect that
We can request it.
We expect that recreation, just using
No,
that as
go,
an
go,
example,
go.
okay, have had, like a public hearing, you know, to, you know, vet out whatever their project is. Or
Mm-hmm.
that they've gone before the historic district because they want to put lighting or something like that in a
Brooks
historic
Park,
area.
yeah.
Right, exactly. So we ask that all of those sign off on this. If it's something that has to go before the Board of Selectmen, if it's something that has to go before planning or, you know, Board of Health.
I would just want to make sure the applicant understands key things they have to get done that may require, you can't do it 2 days before the application's
See,
due.
we've been saying this
Okay.
for, no, I mean,
I know.
years. And, you know, we put it here, we put it there, we don't have it, we do have it, we
But what you're
bold it, we don't.
suggesting is putting the emphasis on the applicant to be responsible for the application. And in some cases, that doesn't necessarily happen.
Okay.
And I won't go into detail.
But we're trying
you're
to
on the right
just clean
track.
this up, so let me just say,
Let's
under
continue.
historic,
Yeah.
this application is for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and/or restoration of historic resources. Please provide the date on which the HDHC reviewed and endorsed this application. Period, the end.
Period, the end.
I would just spell out HDHC.
Yes, I would too.
What?
Some people may not know what the acronym means. I would spell out the name.
Historic
Oh, yeah,
district
yeah,
and
yeah,
historic
that's fine,
preservation.
that's fine. But don't give them the line
That's fine.
about,
That's
you know,
up
if
to
you
the-
haven't.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's up to the board. I'm.
Okay. All right, is that good? Keep going, Chris.
Are we comfortable, is the board comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Next page, so the new requirement, please read paragraph. What are we doing to that? Because
We're taking out that new requirement paragraph,
we are.
Because
Yes.
it's not new anymore.
right? And then this attestation is what Mary has written.
Right, yeah.
Just really.
And then, separate from but related to the physical application, can you refresh my memory, or what happens if someone brings an application in and the opinion of the committee is that it's a worthy application, it probably should be funded, but there are issues with the application itself. We send people away and tell them to revise it and bring it back. I can't, from last year's round, I just can't remember exactly what the process was.
Take that, David?
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm saying you should be taking that one.
Kathy?
All sales
Since
are
we're
fine.
going to have the applications available as of July 1, and since our brochure, okay, which is going to be online
Everywhere.
electronically, says application packets are available online or at the Selectman's office as of July 1. July 1 through October 1, applications may be submitted anytime during this period, okay? So it's up to us as representatives of the various committees to encourage any applicants that we know that are coming from our respective areas to put submissions in sooner than later
Yes.
so that those questions can be addressed.
But,
Outside.
we get the application on July 2nd.
Yep.
We all, by July 3rd, have reviewed it electronically. And noted our,
Yeah.
noted our comments.
Okay.
Noted our
Yeah.
comments and questions. But the person doesn't actually physically show up to take us through it until when? A couple months after?
They can
that.
come in anytime they want, any regular scheduled meeting.
Yeah, but we only have it once a month.
Right.
So,
Well, they can come in
Last
and,
time, they all came at the same time, or they would do it two meetings, I guess.
they come in and, they can come in August, they can come in September.
We
Okay, so-
decide that based on the amount of applications and the time that they don't come in.
Okay, I'm just trying to, we could say on July 2nd, oh, we've all reviewed this, we all have this question, go back to the applicant and say, hey, you screwed this part up, you better revise this. But that, in the real world, that's not gonna happen, right? Because we're not all gonna be talking to each other.
I would say that we would recommend to the representative from that area that they go talk to that particular applicant. That's why we're representatives. That's our first job on this committee is representing the committee or commission. Am I correct?
Except
What do
for-
I constantly
except for
say?
the
Except for you, okay? You're just at large.
He's
That's
everybody.
large and in charge.
Selectmen, I mean,
Yeah.
things have to go.
Right.
So, okay. I'm not sure I got an answer to my question.
Try it in a different way.
So the question is, I'm gonna rephrase
Well, Mary's
the
gonna do it
question.
for you.
The question is, if there are issues with an application after the deadline date of October 1 or October 15th,
When it's being reviewed here physically by the person.
do we allow an applicant to update the information they've given us? Or do we not?
We always have.
And
Okay.
that, I think that's the,
I think we had that conversation last year about whether we should have a cutoff for updating, and we
Right.
decided we would take it on a case-by-case
Mhm.
situation.
In lieu of giving the board members individual applications to walk through. Because the amount of time involved with that, and the amount, in looking at the volunteers. So, the answer is yes.
Okay.
and I think,
So
think
then,
that's the right
the
answer.
applications come in, we set dates for the applicants to come and review in person. From a practical standpoint, that's probably that could be the first time, but it's definitely gonna be the last time that we've had that in-depth conversation among us all. So during that review, we find something, we found something that's wrong, needs fixing. We tell them, you gotta fix this before we'll approve this application, and the application fixed, revised and fixed has to be back to us by boom. And there's gotta be a date in there, right, by which it has to be back. They don't have to physically come
Well,
back.
would have to be before we voted.
Right. So you, essentially what
and
you're
that date could
asking,
change.
there is a second reading.
Yeah.
In other words, typically, we receive them, we have an October meeting, we receive the applications, we distribute them at our October meeting,
Yep,
and then November and December are for reviewing.
yep.
So we usually end up having at least 2 meetings in November and 1 or 2 in December to get through all the applications. And then we deliberate we have in January. Because the warrant articles used to be, had to be in at the beginning of February. Now the date is pushed a little further, so
So
it gave us more time.
So effectively, we're saying to the applicant, look, we're gonna vote on this stuff by January, by our January meeting, so everything has to be by then, so you
Well,
have.
We want them to think that everything has to be by October 1st.
Right, okay.
But there will be changes and updates and additional information that we're looking for, and that's when we
I don't
need
remember
to.
there being a lot of that, but there was some of that.
We have a lot of repeat applicants,
I know.
which
Right.
makes a difference.
Right.
All right, so we can cross the bridge a little bit more when we come to it, that's fine. I have no more,
Just-
I have no more corrections.
Just one thing,
Mary.
two good examples were, you know, the revetment project this year. Amy was still in the process
Right.
of vetting the project, so that information changed, and it made sense for new information to, not to kick it out. But last year, in 17, when the applications, when we had 16 of them, and I think we met 4 weeks in a row on a Thursday night to go through applications, and money was tight, and you didn't know what was gonna get funded, it's a little harder to, you know, if somebody does, if the money changes from 50,000 to 150,000 and money's tight, it's a little
There
bit,
were cases of
it's,
that.
it's harder to give the leeway,
Yeah,
you know, for them to come in, so.
okay.
Two other things. One, we had discussed the affordable housing low-income limits chart here, and I reached out to Andrea, and they said that the new ones hadn't come in yet.
Okay.
They're due in the next month or so, but to just leave this
Okay.
as it was.
That makes
And then the
sense.
last thing was that I made a note that somebody indicated we should put the location of where to bring your finished application, unless it's submitted electronically. Do we want to put, I mean,
It's
The mail-
traditionally been the selectman's office,
right,
on the desk inside the doors, on the right.
okay, what if people put it in your mailbox?
I check the
Well,
mailbox.
should we put that on
They
here?
won't all fit in the mailbox. The
Okay.
mailbox is only,
Mailbox.
So
Time.
what would you like us to put down? We just say Harwich Town Hall, so do we want further
Selectman's office.
clarification?
selectman's office, and
Okay.
Sandy will direct it. Well, whomever's there at the
I
time.
would put John's address.
Now, does select,
Refer to a PDF.
Select-
His email address.
select board didn't go through, so it must be still select
Go
men,
ahead.
right?
Selectman's office.
I've got a
Selectman's
scanner.
office, I think it is, yeah. Yeah, it
Okay.
didn't go through, did it?
No,
No, it was close.
It was.
oh, please.
It'll come back. It'll come back. Okay.
It will.
All right, I've got all your changes. I will make them, and I will put them and hopefully send it out to all of you. And then if everybody says okay, then we'll get it online.
Thank you, Kathy.
Are we set?
We're set.
Motions for rules and regulations on the application.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
You didn't quite finish it.
I know.
Kathy's suggestion about the 20 hard copies in the selectman's office. Is that something we're doing, or are
That-
we
Yes,
omitting?
no, we're doing.
We're not going to have hard copies this year.
Okay. The next thing is, once I type up
The
Mary's
application
text,
does say
um,
that applications
yeah.
are available in the selectman's office.
Oh,
So you
well,
wanna
then we
kill
need to
that.
take that out.
That's in
Good,
there.
good catch,
Good catch. Okay, where was that again?
good catch.
Keep
third
going.
page
Third page
of
of
the app, I
part
think,
of,
isn't it?
I don't remember.
hold on.
I don't know where it is. The other thing is, once I type up Mary's text, I'm gonna send it to Mary to okay before I send it to you, so you may not get it tomorrow, just depends how fast
It's fine.
Mary wants to spend time doing it. Just FYI.
I don't know where this is. Okay, let's see.
I remember you reading it.
And I went, at the time, I went, oh, we have to change that. And I didn't write it,
Oh.
it.
Do you want to just jot it down so you have it?
I've jotted
You
it
can-
down, Kathy. I'll find it and I'll tell you. How's that?
Okay,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Are we set?
What are the rules and regulations?
We talked about
it referred to whether we wanted to have our CPC guidelines,
Codified.
yeah,
Oh,
as part of the application, because that's the only written form that we have of.
how do you codify something?
Legal, rules and
I don't know.
rules and
So typically-
regulations.
So typically, as a board, we would vote rules and regulations, and then we would have public meetings, just like, exactly like rec does. You would have a public meeting.
Right, for changes in anything that we do that we post,
Yeah.
or uses
same
of any
process.
of our.
It's the same process that you would use.
I say no.
If that's what the vote of, we're not gonna vote this. If that's what the feeling of the board is,
Yeah, I just don't, it seems
Chris,
overreaching.
Bob? Mary?
Abstaining.
Kathy? John?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the rules and regulations would be, so since I'm not sure what they would be, I don't really know what to say about it.
I don't know where this is, Jan,
Well-
but
It's in the beginning, I'll
All right,
find
we're
Can
gonna
search
move
for it.
on. Can we skip discussion on the PCP plan until the next?
PCP, yeah, let's skip the
What did
discussion
I
on the
say?
PCP plan.
Can I ask a question about it, though?
uh-oh.
Go ahead, yes.
Was money voted to hire a consultant town meeting to help everybody develop these plans? I thought I heard
Money
that.
that was
That's
voted.
it's for the local comprehensive plan.
Not,
We have put money aside under our administrative budget
Okay.
for the purposes of hiring someone to assist in a plan. But we never spent the money because we didn't.
there was actually two individuals that went through the process with a
Right.
couple of outside entities, and it was deemed to be too expensive,
Okay.
so.
I just didn't know if that was a bonus that we got, that we're gonna get help.
No.
And again, we can bring this back.
Okay.
We can
no,
bring it
That
back.
was just a question, that's all.
Okay, the public hearing on the 13th.
Yippee.
Any discussion, comments?
I went ahead, pass that to Kathy if you would, went ahead, took what we used last year, modified it, and I gave Kathy digital, and then here are the hard copies.
I'm not so sure this should go to Kathy.
It
I think
is-
it would go to Mary.
It is
that's
what
okay.
was written 2 years ago.
Yep,
We used it last year, and then this is this year.
It should be the same. Have the rules changed at all? For
Not that I know of.
Public.
postings? public
And
notice?
the Cape Cod Chronicle dates, our meeting's June 13th. It needs to be printed May 30th and June 6th. I'm submitting no later than Friday, the 20th. We would require it by May 24th. I mean, I can give them to them right now.
Yeah.
If you're, when you give me the
I'll give
okay.
you, I'll
through
look
it.
at it
The
tonight.
20th
go
and-
through it.
Yeah.
Friday, isn't it?
Jan, this is something that we produced 2 years ago
Uh-huh.
as a flyer. It just had a little bit
20th is a
more
Sunday.
to it with some pictures, and we may want to do something like that.
20th is a
I
Sunday.
don't know how much time there is though,
June.
because I'm going out of town.
May.
Shouldn't say
You
that.
said May 20th.
Friday,
I think that's May.
24th. Oh, I just kept pushing it up, actually.
So, yeah, May.
So the 27th is their deadline.
Yeah.
And the 24th is when it's submitted.
Oh, okay, I thought you said the 20th, not the 27th. That's
I
right.
can't,
thought
I'm
you
not
said
clairvoyant,
Friday
I
the
can't
20th.
anticipate when it's coming.
I know, sorry. I'm so tired.
That's
That's
Oh,
all right.
okay.
Wouldn't the brochure?
I think that says
effectively
27.
I'm setting
anyway.
it the 20.
Excuse me, wouldn't the brochure what?
Suff-
Same thing.
Suffice.
Yeah, but this is for the public information hearing.
Yeah.
We have to publicize the legal notices, but we also should publicize at least at the Stop and Shop and the CVS
Community
and
center,
the
the
community
Shaw.
center.
Library.
Yeah.
At least
Stop
a
and Shop.
flyer.
Yeah.
So,
We did one.
I know, do
No,
we
no, no,
want
the
to,
one with the date on it. Remember, we didn't put the date on it because some
wanna, like,
people
put
didn't
some
want it to have the
flyers
date
right
on
by
it.
that?
Okay, it's true.
I'd like us to have one just like this, except change the dates.
Yeah.
I don't have that. Can you send that to me?
Yeah, I don't, I don't have it electronically.
Please, can I have that?
This is beautiful.
But you do have scissors and paste, I think.
No, actually Charlene did this, so, Charlene would probably
She
have
might
it in
have
a
a hard, she
PDF.
might, yeah, she might
Charlene
have
probably
it.
has
have
this. Do you wanna take this, and then you can update it, and then ask Charlene to just print it out?
Could I make one suggestion?
Yes, ma'am.
I seem to recall last year that we kind of spread the wealth around. Didn't we ask the Chamber of Commerce to put some plugs in for us?
We did, we sent an
And there-
email asking the Chamber of Commerce, the Newcomers Club, the Old Timers, and one other, to dispense the information. I have no idea if they did, because I'm not on the email list for any of those places. But as you know, we got no one here, so
I do. So perhaps.
Chris, you on Facebook?
I
perhaps
can
it was
at
our
least ask-
approach.
Huh?
I'll ask-
Studs in that bullet.
I can ask Cindy if she'd be willing to plug us in, give us a plug in other ways, like maybe through her
Network.
or her meetings or her
Well, I think
Channel
we should,
18 show.
I think we
or-
should give them the flyer
Agreed.
and say, is there any way you could, whatever you do,
Yep,
scan and send?
sure.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, in fact,
that what you
don't
do?
they give postings every once in a while on Channel 18 and
Close enough.
advertise
Close enough.
Yeah, well,
locations?
we
But
send
she also
something
has, doesn't
to
Cindy
Channel
also do
18.
a Channel 18 show too, I
But
think.
somebody
Remember
plug
having
it
a
in.
show.
Or somebody does.
So she could plug it on
Not a computer
on
you
a
have.
show too, I would.
Ask.
I have a Mac.
No, I know you don't want to, but ask if somebody else wants to.
Does anybody want to, good point by the secretary. Does anybody want to be interviewed on Channel 18 with this information? I'll just put it out
I defer to any one of you who would like to do that.
there. I did the same thing.
Yeah, oh, you should. Not me.
Bob.
Oh, you're the right person, Kat.
Chris?
I'll be experienced
Baloney.
next
What
year.
is the assignment?
Maloney, you're too new.
Would you be willing to go on
How long have you been
Channel
around?
18 with an interview with this information?
Who would be interviewing me?
Channel 18.
Channel 18
Yeah.
themselves.
They have that show.
They have a-
At 5 o'clock.
It's
Right,
Dinah, it's my
right.
wife, actually, who does a lot of that interviewing.
Really?
Really?
Oh, she can interview you.
Well, then John,
Oh, no.
Come on.
Yes,
John.
that's beautiful.
it's perfect.
Absolutely.
She's not going to abuse you. She'll abuse us, but
Oh,
not you.
really? I respectfully decline because I'm a newbie.
I've heard that an awful lot this evening, and
You have?
I take
This is the
exception.
first time I said it.
But he's ducking for
I'm
cover.
okay with doing it. I assume I can get the questions in advance though.
the hard-hitting interview.
You know something? That is a lot to ask of someone.
No,
So-
I can do it. It depends on the date.
I agree with you though about
I'm
having the,
calling it the
I agree with
outside.
you about having the questions in advance though. It's not really funny. It's,
Well, in
if
fact-
you have them, then you're prepared.
No, in fact, you write the questions for them to ask you.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I'll
There
let
you
my
go.
assistant do that. Yeah,
This isn't going well at all. We're on camera.
I can do it.
It's 8:21.
What?
It's 8:21.
21, I know it.
Just,
Times-
just pointing out the time.
So you're willing to take that on?
I am.
Okay.
The date would have to be right and all that kind of stuff.
All right. Would you plot that down and,
I did.
okay. Is there anything else we need to cover as far as the open?
Do I have a next step on that, or?
Get it done.
Well,
That's the next step.
In 10 minutes.
you should give Chris this information. The legal notice, the flyer, and he can come up with the questions.
No, but I mean, in terms of connecting with whoever
Oh,
Channel
Channel
18
18
is,
is.
what would the next step be there? Do I have to do that myself?
As John pointed out,
Yeah.
Jamie may be
Do
watching.
you have
Yeah.
I'll ask you for the contact and then I'll give it to Chris.
Okay, that's fair.
Sound like a plan?
It's either Jamie or Dinah, or both.
Actually, I know it's through Jamie that I would have initially set it up.
So,
Okay.
So if you want to give me the send me the
and
contact.
I will informally convey the message anyway.
Lovely.
so.
And, what is the date by which this has to be done?
This is just trying to give out the public the announcement that we're having a
No, but
public
is there a
hearing.
deadline by which it has to be done?
No.
Well, anytime before
Ideally-
June,
June
June
13th.
13th.
Yeah.
Ideally before the meeting.
Yeah.
No, there's no
Preferably.
deadline as it is with the newspaper. The
I
mission
do-
is to stir interest with the public.
I'll get on it.
Towards the end of the
Ideally in
month.
the next, say, 10 days, so that then it can get repeated a couple of times before.
They generally do these interviews on Wednesday morning.
Ah,
It's the only day I can't.
Seriously?
Nice try.
Oh, okay.
So as long as we know you're not going away.
right. Oh, God.
Okay. Are we
We
set?
digress.
Are we set with this? The board's
Yeah.
set. All right, next meeting points, anything anybody wants to see on the agenda?
The only thing that we know is that the HDHC is
I
going
may be
to
deferring
do
to
a
Bob
follow-up.
to do
But
that.
other than that, that's the
Yeah,
only one I
that-
know.
That's,
We have a follow-up.
okay. And we are gonna touch on the plan,
And I have the application for you at home, I think.
My hard copy.
so. We don't need to discuss that, do we?
What?
After you made your changes, you wanna go back?
No, no, I'm gonna
Or
send it
else-
to everybody and
Okay, all
they
right.
can,
Is the public meeting date the same date
Yeah.
as this?
Yes, is the next
June
meeting.
13th.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, is there anything else from the board? Any requests on the agenda? No?
No.